Okay, we will begin. Good morning, everyone. Today is May 3rd, 2019. This is your City of Fairhope Development Review Committee meeting. This is a meeting between staff and applicants for various developments. The items we're discussing today are under consideration for the June 3rd, 2019 Planning Commission meeting. And this is recorded for the benefit of the public, but no decisions are made today. No elected or appointed officials participated in this meeting. It's a staff meeting with staff, city staff, and applicants. We'll begin by looking at some the utility reviews. So anyone looking at their agenda, we are going to flip to the second page of our agenda, and we'll begin with case number UR 1915, an AT&T case, and we will let Mr. Mike Jeffries take over.
Hey, morning, Wade.
Hey, Mike.
We're looking at 19.15. There's no handholds or anything in sidewalks. Everything that is going overhead is existing fiber cable already. The only comment on this case, and actually on the other three that accompany it, there's one tree that needs to be trimmed on Fairhope Avenue, just west of the Ace Hardware store. It's on that first page there.
Okay.
It's a laurel oak. I spoke with Paul Merchant, the city's horticulturist, on that. He went out and took a look at it. His only comment was whenever work begins, he would just like to be out there to supervise and be there when the tree is trimmed,
Okay.
To make sure that the tree's not damaged or trimmed back too far or anything like that.
Okay.
The rest of all that, comments from Public Works and Mike Allison with electrical, everything that was underground, everything has its separation that it needs to be, and the rest of it looked good. It should be fairly routine comments on when construction begins, having everything white flagged. I know on some of the work, some of the maps show starting points and end points. Our line locators are getting told to locate, and they're going off of the maps that are provided, so they're going, okay, we're locating at the beginning, but then actually the work starting somewhere else. So I know we're looking at some stuff on trying to get that better communication so we can.
Yeah, Cody and I have had a lot of conversations. He's been spending time with our locators. And part of the issue the locators are having is, where you want to start the project versus the submittal, which may be an entire subdivision at a time.
Okay.
We're going to ask if you would, as a courtesy, and we're working on this in our update that's coming for the right-of-way ordinance, but can they white line the areas with the day right before they're calling in their locates?
Okay.
Because I know one of our guys came in yesterday, and I think he had a stack of over 30 locates
Right.
that he was trying to do in a day. And he can, and it would help them immensely if we can kind of narrow down their focus, and he knows he needs to hit this in this subdivision today, then he can go do the other one that's prior, and then come back and follow up. So if they can white line it for us and let us know where they're going to be, then they can get out there, and that will really, really help them. And when we start having the pre-cons for, when we have pre-construction meetings for all these, I'm going to ask if they can for the locators to be present at that
Well, they
meeting.
should have.
Yeah.
I know we had, you're talking about Windmill, River Mill, that out there?
Yes.
Is that what they're, okay.
Yeah. So if you would, though, if they could white line it so that the guys know where they need to be first.
Right, they should be on those projects for sure.
That'll be.
These are not so large in scope that,
Okay.
I think they try to keep it to about 1,000 foot per locate request, is that right?
Well,
Isn't that what the 811 wants? They want it sectionalized, so I think that generated some of the large numbers, was
Sure.
just because of the footage involved, but,
Well,
yeah.
and y'all have engineering concerns when you get out in the field, depending on where you need to start, like we've talked about, kind of working the sequence you work.
Right.
That'll just help those guys a lot.
Okay.
and the only problem we're having right now is Eagle Creek as far as one person, we go out there and they request an area, we do the area, and then the next morning he said, oh no, we're starting at this other area.
Okay.
I cannot get him back. I mean, we just, between the emergencies and locating meter bayonet, it's hard to.
Right,
I'm trying to get him there and pull him on and all, so we can get them taken care of.
right, stay ahead of it.
But
Right.
yeah, there's a lot, they're calling from this address, but you're only born right here, and that's why we like to have a white flag.
Okay. They should be anyway. I mean, that was what we talked about originally, so I'll talk with them about that.
If you would, I
Yeah.
appreciate it. Thank you.
Okay. So we're moving on to UR 19.16.
Yeah, we can move on to UR 1916 and really 1917 and 1918. The next three, just same comments on the locates. There wasn't anything, there were no trees being trimmed or anything. As far as Paul was concerned, nothing in the sidewalks again for anything, anything aerial.
Yeah, so 16 and 17 kind of go together. There's some poles along South Bayview that Fairhope Utilities wanted to remove.
Right.
So we have an aerial cable that runs down city property behind South Alabama, and it comes through a big oak tree where it crosses Bayview.
Right.
That we're taking all that down.
Removing that fiber
And it's
routing
copper
it.
cable, right, and it's coming back around. And then with that placement, we're placing a spare conduit for the 1917, which is the fiber to serve Acorn Knoll, isn't that it, Acorn?
Knoll Park.
Knoll Park,
Yeah.
yeah, there you go. So, but no, there shouldn't be any tree trimming with those.
And 1918, again, is just some little road crossings, trying to get Fox Hollow Phase 2,
Right.
getting everything connected in there, and there were no issues or any special concerns with that case as well.
Okay,
Okay.
So if you don't have any other questions, we appreciate your time,
thank y'all.
as always. Got you up front this time.
That's right, I'm out.
All right. Thank you, Wade.
Thanks.
Now the hard
Great
work
weekend.
begins.
Thank you, Wade. So we will go back to the front page of our agenda, go to item A, ZC 19.07, Zulu Charlie 19.07, Mr. Mike Jeffries.
Good morning, gentlemen. How are you doing today?
Gentlemen, if you would, just very briefly identify yourself so we know the engineering firm you're working for.
Joe Rector with Mullins LLC.
Micah Jones with Mullins LLC.
All right, this is a zoning change request, requesting to rezone a piece of property from RA to a PUD. It's going to have a commercial aspect to it as well as a residential aspect to it. And I sent you over a review letter kind of with the different criteria for the zoning amendment that was on there. Just briefly, some of the concerns that staff had was we're still needing a traffic study for it. And I'd mentioned on Bay Meadows, that's directly across from the Firethorn subdivision with the different phases that they have, so that there's a special trigger incorporated with their traffic study as far as the traffic light is concerned. Just want to make sure that AlDOT's aware that it's the same area, so that's all taken into consideration in the traffic study for that, as far as if a traffic light's going to be warranted, because that traffic study obviously did not take into account any development on this big agricultural piece of property here. The green space, if we could just provide a map with just where the green space is, take into account what the net gross density is. That's removing the detention pond in the right-of-way, according to the green space ordinance that was adopted earlier this year. It's the net gross density of the actual buildable area that's on there. I don't think that's going to change the overall proposed density, what we have now. As far as the density, you listed it's at 2.9, but that was taking into consideration the commercial out parcel as part of the overall density. With it being a PUD, that out parcel that was to be commercial at some point in time, is probably that's not going to be calculated as far as the development density for the residential area of the neighborhood. So that brought the density up to 3.4. So we just need to make sure that the green space percentage is following line with that. There's going to be some required buffering because that is a commercial area, and a PUD, as defined in the zoning ordinance, is an incompatible land use with every other zoning district. Now, there is a PUD that's to the south. There's natural vegetation that is there that they were required to keep on their end, so we'd keep the same buffer on this side of the property as well. I know we're entering in to that neighborhood using that existing future through street there, which brings back to the traffic study to be sure that it's capturing, because that traffic study for that site also did not take into account this, so the entrance off of Twin Beach could be affected with the added density from this site here, make sure that AlDOT or the department is not going to need any improvements to the road off of Twin Beach as far as turn lanes or anything of that nature. The residential properties that are on the west side, they're zoned R2, but their size of the lots are, up to 2 acres. So the size lots that are proposed for this development, I was trying to make a comparison, but there's 4 lots to 1 on those lots, so they require the same buffering on that side, which I think it shows a 15-foot strip of common space or green space in between it now. That would need to be increased to, I think it's 20 feet, according to the regulations on it there.
Okay.
And then the overall lot sizes, they're smaller than R3 and smaller than R2. I know we're trying to get as many lots in there. Obviously, the more lots you have, the more profitable the project is going to be. But the green space is really being hindered here. There's a small bit of green space that is out around the pond, and I understand the idea behind the pond is to make it an aesthetic feature to have. It should be like a pedestrian circulation plan that's showing what kind of elements are going to be around that pond. I don't know what you guys are thinking about proposing. I know you had said before.
Trail with the gazebos and things like that.
Right. If you could probably draw it kind of showing in the actual percentage of green space of what that's going to be, not counting. I don't know if that your green space calculations counted the pond or area retention. I couldn't tell from the drawings. So just a narrative of how all the green space that's incorporated is going to be used and can be used for the active or passive recreation to be able to justify all of that. And I have a copy. I sent you a copy of the density analysis that was done, and we'll just touch on that briefly. There's a 1/4 mile buffer drawn around the property, and all the properties, the actual and allowable densities were taken into account. The weighted average for all the properties around came out to be 2.01. And as I said, the requested density is 3.4, so there's quite a gap in the density level of what's being proposed and what is around. And again, with some of the buffers that may be added, it might be reconfigure some of the lots where that density could be lowered by nature of just that. But that is a little bit of concern right there.
And gentlemen, I'll interject very, very briefly just to give you an idea. Twin Beach Estates, the as-approved development density of that site was 3.18 units per acre.
Correct.
And they used a variety of different methods to incorporate into that development.
So ours and theirs is the same, the way we did it, because we did have that included.
Okay.
So the 3 you're coming up with is with that excluded, so.
Correct.
So we were matching theirs is where we were coming up with ours. So I ran a quick number, if this parcel, 5.6 acres, stayed the same size that we have it depicted now, our number would be, instead of 110, would be, let's say 103 or something like that.
Mhm.
So we'll redo some of this and tweak this around, and we'll stay consistent, excluding what we have for commercial with that 3.1-ish that you guys have when we're adjacent.
Right.
So,
And then just keep in mind, part of with Twin Beach Estates, and Buford worked on the case, their density level was a little higher, and part of what allowed that density was the way that their different lot sizes, having some lots that were 100 feet, and they're a lot larger lots. They were, some of them were upwards of 15,000 square feet, where all the lots that are currently in your guys' plan, I think were 6,300 and 10,400. I think were the 2 different lot sizes, just below the R2 size and below the R3 size. So part of that was their density is a little higher, but they could have, their initial proposal was for a lot more lots that had a higher density, and then with them creating the larger lots on the periphery and then coming down to where the density was located in the center was kind of what helped balance the little bit higher density with the surrounding area on that.
Theirs and ours both have the same, well, theirs was 75s and 52s, and ours were 50s and 80s, so they're essentially the same. But they did add these 4 here in the front that are the 100-foot lots
Right.
that face out. And that was one of the things we discussed. You know, we had intentionally pulled everything away from the perimeter road.
Right.
But that if we were trying to accomplish this same type of concept is taking these here and making them like they did, to make these 100 foots and extend them all the way out. That's
Right.
the only way we do it. It would be a trade-off. The reason we didn't do that is because we thought, and I'm sure you.
Because
drive down
of all
there,
the-
you drive down there and those
all the oak
huge
trees that are
oak
out there.
trees.
Yeah. Correct.
We kind of thought that this was a better option
And
than this.
And we took that in consideration, knowing that there is that
Yeah.
extra green space buffer area off of Bay Meadows there, keeping that up there.
Yeah, like right in here and everything too, so, but we'll tweak that around and toy that, and we'll end up with very similar to what that one is doing, so we talked about that yesterday, maybe convert some of those.
Right. I know just, council and planning commission has been on green space of it being usable, not having green space that's just tucked behind some lots that, because inevitably what'll happen is lots 1 through 14, chances are they're gonna fence in their yard. So then there's gonna be 15 feet or 20 feet from their fence to the property line that, you know, landscaper might keep up for a couple of years. They may not even know that it's there, and then it's just ends up becoming overgrown, you know,
No
brush
man's land.
back there that,
Yeah, and that was our concept with having a centralized green space on kind of this side here, and then having, you know, some kind of path to interconnect to get you back into where you can access the big, like, usable space for the.
Right,
for
and
the
it's-
community.
some of that area, like, I don't know, drainage wise, I don't know if any of that spot was gonna be used, you know, as swells or low areas to be able to capture water, you know, as partial basins where it's, everything's, I know the way the land slopes is back towards
Yeah.
there. But I know a lot of other subdivisions in the past have had small areas of quote-unquote green space, and then when it rains, it holds the water for a little while, and then for a week, it's a saturated, green field that, you know,
Yeah.
ducks can splash around in it, but it's not really,
Yeah, that's why
usable.
we chose that piece, because it is up on the hill, and it's
Okay.
not a catch basin area.
right, okay,
Yeah. But we still may, it could still slide up. You know,
Right.
It may end up being that you come in, you have an area here and scoot all that down, because that makes it, and that may
Right.
preserve more of those trees too and stuff. So.
exactly.
But yeah, I get.
So that would help, like I said, a nice green space plan with the pedestrian circulation plan, knowing exactly the flow of the land, where it's going to be used, how it's going to be used. And then off of the residential part, on the commercial part, just maybe some allowed uses of what you're wanting to be there, instead of leaving it a wide open book. So that way, you can say, this is for the commercial out parcel. 'Cause I know planning commission, city council, they may as well say, hey, you know, we don't want this, we're not looking for this type deal. So if we kind of started with a base list of some ideas that you guys, if you already had something in
And
mind.
we submitted with the package, some of the drawings that showed that there was right now, it was the mini storage buildings.
Right,
and
that's,
we have-
so you talked about and had drawings of possible mini storages, but at the time we spoke, that was just one possible idea. So I mean, if that's the ultimate goal, then
that's
we
the
can list that
probable-
as
That's
that,
the
but
probable outcome.
I didn't figure you guys wanted to limit yourselves to say that it was going to be storage buildings.
We do.
Leave your options a little
But
bit
we
open
do
there.
both. I mean, the people we work for that will do the development here with Breland, they're going to build the houses. They're going to not only develop, but they will build the houses and
Right.
then also build the mini
Build the storage
So
though. Okay,
That's the goal, is to get them to build the whole thing.
right.
Gentlemen, just one very brief comment I have is on the commercial area. Something we may look at the staff level, something y'all may want to contemplate at the developer level is, and I think that our planning commission and city council might have some additional comfort level if we go ahead and require a site plan review process for that commercial space.
And that was something we actually included in our.
Okay, very good,
narrative.
very good. Fantastic,
And
fantastic.
it actually says here that it shall meet the review as a standalone site plan review for the.
That is very good. Because this is a PUD, that would be something that would be incorporated into the PUD ordinance, but I think that's very, very beneficial to have that in there.
And we did it purposely because, you know, we all know by the time we get plats and construction plans and everything through and get this constructed, we'll be 2 years down the road, and we didn't want to be sitting on a site plan that expired eventually. So it also works for timing because they don't want to build that until they get this pretty much.
Understood.
right or done.
Understood.
And then we start that process.
Right.
Very
It
good.
gives everybody a shot to make sure that that standalone meets everybody's expectation as well.
Very good.
That was basically most of the comments that I had was basically mostly the green space, make sure the buffering was there. You guys have any other questions or concerns?
We got Neil Schaefer working on this right now. And
Okay.
we'll have that prior to the meeting, so we'll have all those with us as well. Is there anything? No. Oh, utilities.
Well, signature.
And gentlemen, obviously, you know, at this stage, certainly our utility groups will assist give you as much input as they can. Obviously, you have to design a portion of the subdivision as your supporting documents for your PUD, but I think most of all the technical issues you'll have will address at the actual subdivision stage.
I mean, all the feedback we've gotten so far is we have the ability to serve.
Yes, sir. Yes,
That's-
sir.
Be Fairhope.
And that was, we can.
Correct. And I
Whatever
believe-
needs to be done, if a main or something, that can all be brought in. And I had thought about the street lighting plan, but at this point, going into it, yet inside the narrative, there was one, that the poles would be set wherever the utility company wanted them.
And it's
When
kind
we
of a
get-
standard that's been done on these other ones. They have a little bit nicer looking. yeah.
Right. So yeah, once we get to the this goes through and get to the actual subdivision, then the actual, the light poles and that thing would be reviewed a little more in detail. It was,
Gentlemen, I believe this is going to be Baldwin EMC for power.
Right.
Okay.
I think I said earlier on something.
I think in this case, this is probably going to still be in Baldwin EMC's territory.
I do want to make a note. Also, you need to go ahead and plan for a mailbox
GDOS.
box.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Is this parcel the one that has the existing house on that?
yes.
Existing house right in the center? Yes.
Okay, so that's gonna go away. Yeah, we got gas running to that house, and I just wanna make sure where I can pull back and run from the right of way off of that.
Yeah.
Okay.
That's correct.
Very good. Well, gentlemen, anything else we can do for you at the staff level?
Well, if you guys come across any questions or anything you need to ask, just you got my email, you got my phone number. Drop me a line, let me know, and we can get it addressed as quickly as possible.
We'll get you a copy of that traffic as soon as we get it. And this will go forward to, what's the date?
June 3rd.
June 3rd.
Is what I'm
Yep.
saying. All right, June 3rd.
Okay. We'll move on.
Thank you.
Thank you, gentlemen. Item B, ZC 19.08, Zulu Charlie 19.08. This would be a public hearing to consider the request of City of Fairhope staff for an amendment to Article 5 of the Special Districts and Uses in the zoning ordinance to establish a Green O Road corridor overlay district. What I'll just simply note here very briefly is this is an amendment under development by staff right now, and the intention is to have a document for first reading and first review by the Planning Commission on June 3rd. I will mention this item on Monday, May 6th, Planning Commission meeting, and just very briefly verbalize into the record and for the benefit of the public and the Planning Commission some of the basic provisions that we will be investigating, but the intent is to consider this on June 3rd. We'll move along to item number C. This is SD 19.22, and this is Ms. Nancy Mulford.
Thank you. Larry, you want to come up?
Do we need to discuss anything?
There's not much on this. We went through this last month, and this will be on our agenda as an informal review. At Southland, they're planning on, or proposing to divide some common area. Staff has some concerns about it. We've had some legal review on it, and they're basically going to go for some informal feedback. Procedurally, if they choose to take it forward, it would really not be a subdivision plat. It would be a PUD amendment, and then I guess if you divided those two lots, then it would go to subdivision. But as far as timing, there's really nothing for me to write at this point, so.
Yeah, my instructions to my client were to have their HOA attorney contact the planning commission attorney and make sure they're on the same page.
Sounds great.
If the law that Mr. Johnson put out there is truly doing what he thinks it is, then I think you're pretty much, unless you can get 100% approval from the HOA, you're kind of out of luck. And so we're just waiting on those. Attorneys don't like to talk to each other for some reason, for a while, but waiting on that communication to occur. And maybe it has. I haven't followed up this morning, but we're still planning on doing the informal review because
Right.
even if the attorneys agree and we can do it, we still want to get the feedback from the planning commission on the concept of taking excess green space and converting it to sellable lots. And I was hoping Richard would be here this morning to kind of discuss the rationale. I sent him the drainage study that was done, and I'm sure y'all have a file about that on it, because reading through that drainage study, there were a lot of attorneys talking about the drainage stuff, issues in that neighborhood. So I'm sure y'all are aware of some of it, and so I just sent him that. That was done by another engineering firm. They just hired me to try to subdivide it. So I'm not saying that engineering study is accurate or not. I'm just saying that here it is. And
I think he's looked at it. He hasn't provided a lot of feedback to me on the specifics of the drainage itself, but as far as for June,
Yeah.
I think that's probably not going to be on June's agenda.
I
It'll
don't
be-
think so either.
And when it comes in, it'll be a PUD amendment, at least the first round. So,
Yep.
okay.
All right, easy enough.
Thank you, Mr. Smith. So we'll move on to case number SD 19.23, a subdivision case. Mr. Jeffries.
This is one we talked about, similar to last month, similar to the case we just talked about now. They're coming in as a 2-lot minor subdivision. They're going to go in front of the Planning Commission Monday, May 6th as an informal review. Some of the concerns on this was it was a 4-lot county exempt subdivision, and then is a 2-lot minor of one of those lots on top of that. Fairhope subdivision regulations do not acknowledge family exemptions or one-time split exemptions that the county has. Therefore, any piece of property that is located in Fairhope's ETJ must go through, which is the extraterritorial jurisdiction, must go through Fairhope subdivision regulations, meet their criteria, go in front of the Planning Commission, and be approved like every other subdivision. They're going to go in front of the Planning Commission on Monday, introduce their case, and kind of get the feedback from the Planning Commission and see where they stand. If they come up with a plan that the commission deemed that they think could be acceptable, and the city attorney also agrees could be acceptable, and they can get new documents resubmitted in time for advertisement and a proper review by staff, then it could possibly move forward and be on the agenda for the June 3rd meeting. But we'll wait and see after the meeting on Monday to see exactly where we stand with this case.
And Mike, if I may very briefly, this case was a unique situation where the convergence of the convergence of the types of requests by the applicant forced us as staff to take up this issue and make a much more affirmative declaration about the provisions of the subdivision regulations. On Monday, May 6th meeting, I'm going to also give a short briefing to the Planning Commission and advise them of the in general procedure that staff is going to follow, at least in the interim period that we're under right now.
Correct.
Okay, so we'll move on to case number SD 19.25, Riverwood Estates. Mr. Jeffries.
All right. This is SD 1925, major subdivision of 23 lots in River Place subdivision. This is located outside of the city limits of Fairhope, located in the ETJ. Chris Lieb is representing the applicant for the case. Chris, I sent you the review package and all that via email. Some of the concerns that were mentioned on there, it was the green space. Maybe I haven't provided a drawing with the different green space where it is. Some of the green space was labeled on, I think it was sheet 3 of the plans, and it had a green space was hatched in. Some of it appeared that it might be in drainage areas or not usable. There was one corner on the, I think it was the northeast or southwest corner. Some of the plans were north was top of the page, and some of the plans were so looking at them sometimes it was a bit confusing going which turn the sheet.
Yeah, I understand. wish I had done these drawings myself, but I didn't. But the 10% green space, let me back up. Those 20-foot little green space areas that are labeled green space are essentially drainage easements.
Right.
And so the overall 10% that were required are in the 60-foot strip here and all back behind the lots. So we have more than 10% shown on this plan, but we'll go back and
If
make
you
a
get
drawing
just
showing.
even just a color-coded drawing showing, when we get in front of the planning commission, they've made it clear that they prefer to see a colored scheme, that way they can see it with their eyes and they're not trying to guess at what is green space. It just makes it easy to explain to them, here's the green space requirements, here's where it's located at, and half the time they're going, well, is that drainage or is that green space? So no, there's the green areas, that's the green space.
Gotcha.
Here's a percentage, so that helps on that.
We'll get that drawing made for you.
All right. Some of the stuff was kind of simple routine. Just need to locate a future, or show a future through street on the plans as listed. Need a street lighting plan, and preferably with a cut sheet of what the proposed street light will be. A landscaping plan. That shows, I looked on the drawing for the proposed road section way, that there was 6.5 foot green area. The subdivisions require an 8-foot planting strip in between it. And it shows, if you add up the numbers, it shows it's a 50-foot right-of-way, but then you start adding it up, there's actually looks like there's 2 feet of play from what is being added up. I think there was 18 feet and then 6.5 feet, and then I can't remember what the last number was, but it seemed like it actually totaled up to 48, that there was 2 feet missing from the overall, so there's room on each side for a little bit of expansion, but that 6.5 needs to be 8 feet. And that allows rooms for the street trees and things of that nature to be planted. The stormwater, Richard Johnson's still in review of those to make sure all of that is in compliance.
Okay.
I'm also going to need a drawing. There was no LID information provided. I saw on some of the drawings it showed that there was a grass swell in some areas where it said it was an LID technique, but I need something in more of a form showing what the TSS removal of everything is, and some calculations showing that the TSS removal is meeting the 80% total suspended solids removal for the complete site. The sewer. I know you guys have been in contact with Richard Peterson.
Yes.
Are you going to go through Baldwin County Sewer, or are we going with septic, going through the health department?
Yes, this will be going through the health department and on septic tanks. That's why we kept all the
Okay.
lots at 20,000 square foot minimum.
Right. And that was kind of the assumption. I just wanted to verify.
Absolutely.
We need a topographic survey with an aerial photograph behind it and the plat overlay. Was it in there? Okay, I'm sorry, I must have completely missed that page. Well, then cross that one off. Cross that one off the list. And I just need a traffic study or a letter just find why one is not needed, along with the tree protection plan. I know there's really no trees on it. There's no trees on it, so just
to protect.
just
Write a letter.
just write a letter. That way it's on the file. Is the street going to be dedicated to the county?
I'll have to get with the developer.
Okay.
I would assume it would be.
Because with it being in the ETJ,
Yeah.
some things will be the county's responsibility to inspect and maintain and all that. So if it is, we'll just need correspondence from the county verifying that they've accepted everything. And the county's going to require this to go through through their commission for approval as well?
No.
They're not?
It needs to go through engineering review, which it currently is.
Okay.
But they don't, if it goes through y'all's planning commission, it's not their planning
So never
commission as
mind.
well, but they reviewed the engineering side of things.
All right. Whenever they finish that review, if you could provide a copy
Yes.
of the correspondence from them acknowledging that. Emily touched on this just a second ago, but the post office, they may regulate what type of mailbox is going to be, whether it's single pole or whether it's a cluster box located. 23.
think anything over 20, they require you to have a,
Yeah, have a community.
have a box, a
Yeah.
bank, a mailbox bank.
And that's,
Just out of curiosity, when did that happen? 'Cause the last three I've done, it's turned to that, but I guess it was recently.
Yeah, and it's not our requirement, it's
Yeah.
what they are.
Yeah, because Fairhope subdivision regulations certainly allow individual mailboxes, but obviously the Postal Service is the regulatory authority
Right.
for
Do
postal
you know what
delivery.
changed?
No, I don't know when it
Recently.
changed, but I know half the time they don't even enforce it.
Yeah. Chris,
My old neighborhood, we were supposed to have shared mailboxes, and we were the only one because we were the first house. After that, everybody put individual mailboxes up, so I had 2 mailboxes for the mailboxes.
Chris, the first time since I've been with Fairhope, the first time I recall this coming up was when we went through the approval process on Twin Beach Estates, which has been about 14 months ago, 16 months ago.
So that being said, if there is a mailbox kiosk, do we need to provide parking spaces?
The previous application that I reviewed, they did.
Like a-
just
Or
the,
they-
not parking spaces, but I would say just
Yeah.
a pull off, just
Yeah.
to, so the mail lady's not stuck, blocking up traffic.
Chris, I would talk to the postmaster because with your lot widths, that's really what they're concerned about is how many stop and goes if you're really there, but y'all are doing 2
That's it,
2,000 square foot lots.
Yeah.
The size of the lots.
They may not make you.
Yeah.
I don't know the requirements, what they look at, but that's certainly, I thought, going, if you have half-acre lots, is a kiosk going to be required, or they're going to say, that's plenty enough room, they're not stopping every 30 feet for a mailbox.
Right.
Need to add a little note on the plat, there's a 10-foot buffer that is on there, that's just, and it's listed in the review checklist, but the 10-foot buffer, just noting that it's to be used for the planting of trees or shrubs. No structures are going to be built, and the notes listed in the checklist that's there. Add the site density to the site data box, and really lastly was just need an O&M plan. I have an agreement that's in here. It's a blank agreement, hasn't been signed or anything, and it's an agreement of the stormwater improvements, but an actual O&M plan of how it's kind of like directions to the homeowner association on what they should do,
Gotcha.
on cleaning out the pond, checking the ponds, it's a checklist. Like I said, I have where you sent in the stormwater facility and green space maintenance agreement. So the agreement part's in here, but the actual plan on what they're agreeing to do isn't in there. So we just put together the different, and that's when you come up with the LID techniques on how they are to maintain them, when they're to be inspected. On the pond, it's a monthly or an annual inspection to make sure there's no overgrowth, anything growing in the pond, that sort of thing.
You've done those before.
I have.
Yeah, so you've got that.
Yeah, I thought it was the end of that document, but you might not have done.
There was,
I'll go back.
the checklist was at the end of the document, but there wasn't, at least the copy I got, didn't have anything listed on far as what was to be checked
Gotcha.
on it. And
Yeah, technically, the way that worked is there was, a long time ago, we had an engineer who developed some guidelines, but the requirement is actually up to the engineer to do it site-specifically. So,
And one more note on that, there's a small error in it, subdivision regulations changed, again, at the very beginning of this year is when it got adopted, that the first inspection is the 3rd year, and then the follow-up inspections are every 5 years, not 3. That was a change that the planning commission made not too long ago. And that was most of the big things. There was a couple smaller items listed in there that were kind of routine. If you have any questions on any of them.
So, right here on this letter, it says we need a landscape plan. I thought since it was in the ETJ,
You still need
Street trees.
for the street trees. It doesn't. It is outside of the police jurisdiction. Therefore, the landscape and tree ordinance does not apply. But there is the landscape requirements that are in the subdivision regulations.
that's where the confusion was. Thank you for clearing that up.
Yes, sir. And if you have any other questions. Everything else that was in here was mostly, you know, minuscule, you know, maybe adding a note here or there to the plat, and we hit on all the major drawings. So if you just get those drawn up and resubmitted, then,
13th.
yes, sir.
Will do.
Thank you very much. If you have any other questions between now and then, feel free to let me know.
Okay.
We'll get them taken care of.
Will do. Thank you.
Thanks, Chris.
Thanks. And then we'll move on to case number SD 19.26. This is a case I'm reviewing, and Mr. Smith is Mr. Larry Smith is the engineer of record. This is a 3-lot minor subdivision at the intersection of Gayfer and Bishop. And Larry, we're good to go on this one. Yeah. I couldn't get the words out.
I sunk down in my chair.
I'm sorry, Larry, that's how I should have led off. Larry, no issues. This is a very routine application for our audience. This is a very routine application. Everything is in great shape. There's a couple items of correspondence that Larry will provide me via email, and we'll be good to go.
We do appreciate your enthusiasm.
Absolutely, Larry.
He's not used to that kind of comment.
I know, normally y'all
He's-
beat me up. I normally feel like Chris over there. Like, where's your O&M?
There we go. So we'll move on to item G. We're back on the second page of our agenda. This is case number SD 19.27. This will be a final plat review for Fairhope Falls, and we'll hand it over to Ms. Nancy Milford.
Okey-dokey. It's a final plat. They have not called, well, we've set up the inspection, but we've not had the final inspection. They've submitted the as-bills, and Richard Johnson and Richard Peterson basically signed off on the requirements for final inspection.
Okay.
Are, as you probably looked from the checklist, Public Works is probably not going to be there. Kim Burmeister will probably not be there because it's outside of their, and Eric, it's outside of their
Jurisdiction.
Fairhope Falls is outside of the permit jurisdiction. So on those you'd need to get with Silver Hill on their issues for sidewalks and for erosion control. And I guess that's.
Actually, on that, check and see, it's in the Silver Hill permitting jurisdiction. I don't believe it's in their city limits. So for sidewalks and roads, you probably need to contact Baldwin County. Because that's going to be county roads. And Vince Raymer, you know, we've had conversations with Vince when they have sidewalks and intersections and crosswalks. They typically come out and they're inspecting them if they're going to be county right away.
Okay.
We are going to want a letter from the county or something from them showing that they've approved it for final inspection, right? And pretty much everything was very straightforward, some minor issues with the plat, very minor. On the landscaping, we've got the landscape plan for both Verandas and Fairhope Falls. We just need to take it out in the field with Paul Merchant. And, well, again, that kind of falls outside of their jurisdiction. I mean, our jurisdiction. But anyway, it'd be great to have the landscaping in.
Yeah.
So, and I think you've got the bonds for the street trees, except for the Verandas. We're waiting on the subdivision bond for that one. Got the maintenance bond. And I will say that one of the reasons I was late, I apologize to the group, but I had an operation, my computer operating system kind of crashed this morning. So.
That's never a good thing.
Yes.
Never a good way to start the morning.
So I got them emailed out to you, not transferred to shared network, so I may be calling you. I think they've got it worked out, but
Okay.
I may be able to find it in my email
That's fine.
system.
And Steve was supposed to be here, but about an hour ago, I was like, oh, I need you to go, so.
Yeah, no worries.
Yeah.
You've been voluntold.
Yep.
Well, I think these are pretty straightforward, so.
Very good. So, Nancy, did we cover what you needed for Verandas as well?
Pretty much. It's
Okay.
very much the same scenario.
Same subdivision bond.
Yeah, and I got a copy, I think, I may get with you after. I'll run a copy so that you can take the originals with you.
Okay.
There were very few markups on the drawings. There is on the plat on Fairhope Falls, I think you've got over here a 10-foot easement, but I believe if you check our regs, it's a 15-foot easement.
Okay.
So just double check
Yeah,
that.
I'll look at that.
And so I'll give that to you since that's got the markup. And if you'll hold off just a minute, I'll go, one of them's copied, the other one is not.
Okay. Easy
All right.
enough.
Anything else? Anything else for staff while you have us here?
That's all.
All right, very good. Well, just a quick reminder, the items discussed today will likely be considered on the June 3rd, 2019 Planning Commission meeting. We do have a Planning Commission meeting Monday, May 6th as well. Both meetings begin at 5 p.m. in this room, City Council chambers. So unless there's any other questions from staff, we will adjourn.
Is that one?
Okay.
And